The honourable member for York Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to mention that I will be splitting my time with a member from La Salle-Émard-Verdun. Today we're debating a motion that the House reject the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, which according to the text of the motion promotes the demonization and delegitimization of the State of Israel. I would like to begin my remarks today by pointing out to all my honourable colleagues that the motion leaves out the all-important third D, that notorious double standard applied to Israel. Mr. Speaker, I believe the Prime Minister said it best. I'm opposed to the BDS movement. I think it's an example of the new form of anti-Semitism in the world, an example of the three Ds: demonization of Israel, delegitimization of Israel, and a double standard applied towards Israel. I'm proud of our Prime Minister's position. As we've seen throughout human history, when we let intolerance fester and grow, it inevitably leads to tragedy. BDS is about intolerance. It's a broader movement to demonize and delegitimize Israel and collectively punish all Israelis by holding Israel alone responsible for the Arab-Israeli conflict. Whereas anti-Semites have long targeted Jews throughout the world as the root of all society's ills, this new form of anti-Semitism targets Israel as the Jew among the nations, singling out the Jewish state as the root of all ills in the world. We don't need to look very far to see examples of this obsessive focus on Israel. We see it every year at the United Nations, where the agendas of the Human Rights Council and General Assembly are clogged with one-sided resolutions that condemn only Israel, in the most heinous terms, deflecting attention away from the world's most prolific human rights abusers. I'm proud that Canada voted against the annual anti-Israel resolutions at the UN General Assembly this past November, continuing the principled approach initiated by Prime Minister Martin and which persisted under the previous government. Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw the attention of my honourable colleagues in this House to the Ottawa Protocol on combating anti-Semitism, which is instructive in identifying the anti-Semitism that is so pervasive within the BDS movement. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of Israel is a racist endeavour, that is anti-Semitism. Applying double standards by requiring of Israel behaviour not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, that is anti-Semitism. Using the symbols or images of classic anti-Semitism to characterize Israel or Israelis, that is anti-Semitism. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, that's anti-Semitism. Holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the government of Israel, that's anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism so pervasive within the BDS movement involves the discrimination against and the denial of Jewish national self-determination and the right of the Jewish state to exist as an equal member of the family of nations, a universally recognized principle enshrined in the UN Charter. It's no surprise that many BDS activists and leaders oppose the two-state solution and acknowledge their true objective is the destruction of Israel. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic, and saying so is wrong. If criticism of Israel is similar to that levelled against any other country, then it cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. But singling Israel out for selective condemnation, let alone denying its right to exist or seeking its destruction, is discriminatory and hateful, and I encourage all of my honourable colleagues to rise in this House and affirm that fundamental fact. Mr. Speaker, no one is claiming that Israel should be above the law. The issue is not that universal human rights standards should not be applied to Israel. They should be applied equitably and to the same extent that they're applied right here in Canada. Unfortunately, this is not the case. The cause of human rights, for which Canadians care so deeply, is being hijacked and abused, with Israel denied fair and equal treatment. Mr. Speaker, the solutions to these issues are not easy. Internationally, we must continue to stand up and denounce this flawed and discriminatory process. But within Canada, and as Canadians, we cannot confront hate with hate. We must approach and fight intolerance with civil discourse and education. What the BDS movement attempts to do is to silence dialogue and stifle that education. The BDS movement referenced today is largely, but not entirely, confined to university campuses across our country. As the Ottawa Protocol points out, universities should be encouraged to combat anti-Semitism with the same seriousness with which they confront other forms of hate. Universities should enforce zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind against anyone in the university community on the basis of race, gender, religion, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, or political position. Too many times on university campuses, small but vocal groups call for a boycott of Israeli academic institutions with hateful vitriol, espousing exclusion rather than inclusivity on Canadian campuses. If we agree that education and dialogue are the best tools at reducing intolerance, then increasing contact and collaboration between academics is ideal. This dialogue allows for free exchange of ideas and embraces academic freedom. But when groups call for a boycott of Israeli academics, there is a reduction in dialogue and education and a degradation of discourse and ideas. Rather than increasing understanding and tolerance, it furthers intolerance and xenophobia. The BDS movement's narrow objective of demonization and delegitimization precludes any meaningful conversation. When Jewish students feel unsafe on campus because they are harassed and intimidated, when non-student instigators are sent to campuses to create this environment of intolerance, we cannot be silent. Mr. Speaker, as a Jew and a father of 2 teenagers, I have great concern for the actions I see taking place on university and college campuses across the country. The BDS movement has created a toxic atmosphere on campus for many Jewish students. I worry about what lies ahead. Next Monday, for the 3rd time in less than 2 years, McGill University students are being asked to support a BDS campaign aimed at delegitimizing Israel. This phenomenon is not limited to one campus, but is happening across our country and internationally. I am proud of the students who stand up and oppose these kind of attacks. In particular, and as a McGill alumnus, I want to recognize the Vote No McGill campaign and the incredible work being done by the students who initiated this effort. I wish them luck on Monday to resoundingly defeat these recurring BDS motions. The BDS movement has no place on Canadian campuses. Those aren't my words, Mr. Speaker. They're the Prime Minister's. He said that last year about the BDS initiative at McGill, a message he reiterated clearly when BDS reared its head again at UBC. As we've seen in numerous organizations and on campuses across the country, intolerance does not rest. We cannot rest either in confronting it. Silence is not an option. We must do what we are doing today and condemn it. Every time the BDS movement and other types of intolerance raises its head, no matter what form it takes, we must stand up and call it what it is: hate. Mr. Speaker, I pledge to never be silent in the face of such hate, and it is clear that our Prime Minister will not be silent either. I ask for and thank my fellow members for their support of this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Flamborough-Glenbrook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And although often in this House there's good cordiality in saying that I appreciate the speech of my colleague, I really, really appreciate the speech of my colleague. Mr. Speaker, in 1939, Canada had a policy of none is too many regarding Jews. The St. Louis was turned away, and it's a stain on our history. And those kinds of things happen because people said hateful things and nothing was ever said about it. So I'd just like to ask my colleague in regards to the broader conversation here today, and I want to do that with respect, not calling on any kind of partisanship, not trying to rail against another party, but simply trying to say in this issue, when do we start saying no? When does this House begin to loudly say enough is enough? This is breeding hatred that we don't want to have in this country, and it is damaging our social discourse, and it is moving towards a hateful situation that will turn into something that none of us want to see. When do we begin to say strongly, enough is enough?
For York Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. I am proud to stand here and say that our Prime Minister has said enough is enough repeatedly where BDS has been concerned on Canadian campuses over the last number of years. I know that it's something that this House feels strongly about, and I encourage members of this House to vote in support of this motion today. Thank you.
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague from Laurier-Sainte-Marie mentioned earlier in her speech, we need to remember what was said by Voltaire. I disapprove of your opinion, but I will fight to the end of my days for you to have the right to express it. And I find it incoherent to hear the Liberal Party, which historically has been the party of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, attacking a civil society movement to try to shut them up. Should we not rather encourage people to speak out freely, peacefully? How is it that a member of the Liberal Party feels that it's shameful for Parliament in this case?
Thank you, and Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. I think I can best respond to that by actually quoting the position of the NDP leader on this issue. When asked, where do you stand on the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, the leader of the NDP said the following: I think it's absurd and I disagree with it. Our focus is achieving real progress in the peace process, lifting countries in the region up, not putting Israel down. He also stated, we take our decisions together, parties formulate policies together, and to say that you're personally in favour of boycott, divestment and sanctions for the only democracy in the Middle East is, as far as I'm concerned, grossly unacceptable. I share the leader of the NDP's view on this, and I hope that members of this party will support this motion. Thank you.
Questions et